very much. So first of all, thank you for organizing and giving me an opportunity to present. I'm very happy to be here. So my paper is entitled Location Choice, Marriage and Immigrant-Native Earnings Gaps, Evident from Germany. And as I already mentioned a few minutes ago, I hope that it's going to be my job market paper next year. So, okay, so first, I just would like to motivate my topic. So we know that 1 in 10 people across OECD countries are foreign-born, which simply means that they are a big part of the societies and they are also a very relevant part of the labor force. Due to this, there is an ongoing discussion about economic assimilation of immigrants, and this is one of the things which is attracting the attention of policymakers. So the literature, the migration literature is coming with the list of a lot of potential mechanisms which can make wages, particularly if we think about economic assimilation, for example. So wages of immigrants are close to the one of natives. So in this long list of mechanisms, there is particular one which is in the interest of mine. It's called intermarriage. Just for the clarification, I define intermarriage as a cohabitation of immigrant and native. So why do I think about intermarriage as a potential assimilation mechanism? So if you go to the data, and I'm using, as I mentioned already, I'm using German data, we could see that those immigrants who are intermarried, they on average less often perceived disadvantage due to origin. They also report higher skills when it comes to oral German level. They use more often German media. What is also interesting, for example, they also more often received a visit by a German. So in this could also suggest that they are somehow better integrated within the local network. So you could think that, okay, if an immigrant is coming to you and asking, okay, what to do to earn as much as natives, or how to close the gap, you could say, okay, let's marry a native. That's like a very simple recipe. However, as we can imagine, it's not that simple, in the sense that immigrants are facing a trade-off, because we know from the literature that people have preferences for similarity. So in the sense, maybe they would like to marry a person who is from similar culture, who maybe, I don't know, share similar values, or I don't know, for simply likes the same type of food. Yeah. So on one hand, we could see that marrying a native could be beneficial from the economic point of view, but on the other hand, maybe there are some preferences for marrying an immigrant. So, but this is just like part of the story, because if we look further in it, we can say, okay, but what if immigrants have, I don't know, preferences for dissimilarity, but still, even though they all would like to marry a native, we need like another side of the marriage market. So we also need natives who are willing to marry immigrants. So choices with whom to marry of immigrants, they're restricted by the pool of potential partners. Literature provides a lot of evidence that the pool of potential partners is rather local. So in the sense that if we think about the marriage market and we take like Germany, we shouldn't think about one global German marriage market, but it's rather a set of local marriage markets. So this leads to the conclusion that not only with so the marriage choice is not only influenced by their preferences, but also by the location where they live. So if we look at the data, and here on the y-axis we have intermarriage rate of male immigrants, and on the x-axis there is immigration rate in the opposite sex, so in the female population, and also the log ratio of male to female immigrant. We could see that the bigger the share of immigrant female in the local female population, the lower the intermarriage rate among male immigrants. The same, so this is like a composition immigrants versus native, but if you look at the composition within the immigrants group, then we can see, so the more male per one female in the immigrant group, so the higher the competition for immigrant partner, the more likely are male to marry outside of their migration group, so to marry a native. The same picture would hold also for female immigrants, and this could suggest us that this is kind of an empirical evidence that the role of the location and the structure of the local marriage market has an important implication on the probabilities with whom immigrants will marry. And this is kind of opening to the discussion about the potential effects of different policies. And I will be a little bit more specific about it later, but you could think that by introducing policies which are changing the distribution of immigrants within the country, policymakers are also affecting their marriage choices. So just to sum up and present the research question, the main question which I will try to answer in my work is, how do migration policies influence marriage patterns via changes in the location choice of immigrants, and what are the labor market consequences of those changes? So just for a second, let's try to stay a little bit, try to look at the problem which I was trying to present you from the immigrant's perspective. So if we consider the situation which I've just described, we could distinguish that there are like three important choices. So there is like location choice, there is marriage choice, and there are labor market choices. So if you look at the location choice, we can see that the immigrants could take two factors into account. First, we know that different regions, they have different level of wages. So probably going to one region versus the other could be a source of some economic gain. So on the other hand, which I have already demonstrated to you, different location could also be associated with the different pool of the potential partners, and as a result, it has an impact on marriage market outcomes. The same if you look at the marriage. So with whom we marry, probably it has an impact on our wages. So here I'm plotting hourly wage, real hourly wage for both male and female by marriage status, which I consider free status. So you can be single, non-intermarried, and intermarried. And what we can see for male, that intermarried immigrants on average earn more than non-intermarried ones. And the same is true for female. The only difference is between those two groups is that in case of male, it's also true if we compare it to single immigrants. In case of females, this kind of relationship does not hold. But what is to take from this picture is that, and those wages, I should mention it before, those wages are net of education, experience, year, region, and country of origin fixed effects. So I try to control for a bunch of stuff. And then even though if we control for it, we can still, that there are some differences. Of course, there could be different stories behind it. That's why I'm going to build a model to try to explain it. But if you look like just at the raw data, we see a pattern here. So considering this all three choices, immigrants make their decision when it comes to where to live, with whom to marry, and to participate or not in the labor market. So if we look now at the problem a little bit from the policymaker perspective, and instead of focusing on the kind of micro data, we'll rather think about it in the macro perspective. What we are coming as a conclusion is as follows. So on the y-axis, there is a wage gap expressed in the percentages. So this is the wage gap is defined as a difference between wages of immigrants and native. And each bubble represents a birth cohort, birth cohort, male and female and different education groups. There are three education groups here. On the x-axis, there is a log of intermarriage rate. So what we can see here is that the more immigrants is intermarry within this defined groups, the smaller is on average the gap between immigrant and native wages. So, of course, I mean, policymakers do not impact marriage choices directly. And I mean, this is not considered to be like a real policy tool. However, by designing different policies, they could change the immigrants' location choices. So which kind of policies do I have in mind? So first, in some countries, for example, in Spain, the work permits for non-EU citizens are limited to specific geographical area for the first year. But I mean, one can also think about extending this kind of policy for more years. Another example of the policy, this is the policy which is usually used in case of refugees, is the fact that we have obligatory relocation mechanism. So there is some kind of rule based on some criteria which is allocating immigrants to different regions. So this kind of policy clearly influences immigrants' location choices, and by that it has an impact on the marriage market, which could have consequences for the differences in wages between immigrants and natives. So to address all these issues, to address my research question, I'm going to estimate a structural model which allows for heterogeneity in earnings by partner's origin. So this part of the model is going to capture the effect with whom we marry on the wages. And in this model, I'm going to link location and marriage choices and introduce the immigrants to the equilibrium framework, which later allows me to evaluate the policies which are shifting special distribution of immigrants on their marriage market and labor market outcomes. And I'm going to estimate this model using German socioeconomic panel and German. So the German socioeconomic panel is the dataset which I'm going to use for estimation of wages and labor supply, and then the marriage market and location choice is estimated using German microcases. So just let me be quick when it comes to my contribution to the literature. So there are three specific streams of the literature to which I believe my research contributes. So the first one is the literature which analyzes the impact of intermarriages on economic outcomes. And I will try to contribute to this stream of the literature by conducting relevant policy experiments. There is also a very big literature when it comes to equilibrium models of the marriage market. So my contribution here lies in the fact that I'm introducing immigrants to the equilibrium framework, and I'm analyzing the effect of their location choices on the marriage market outcomes. And the last stream of the literature is the literature which analyzes economic assimilation of immigrants. So to this literature, I contribute by studying intermarriage as a potential mechanism which can close the gap between immigrants and natives. So now I would like to present you my model. So in my model, everyone is born with a human capital, and human capital is a sum of two elements. So everyone has an origin. So you are native and immigrant. In my definition, which I'm going to use in the empirical part, immigrants are all agents which I observe who are born outside of Germany. Then everyone also has education, and there are three levels of education. So it could be primary, secondary, or tertiary education. So this gives me 6 possible combinations of human capital. Now the question will be, okay, so we are born with the human capital. So now if we think about the participation in the marriage market, why should we marry? So this very important lifetime decision I was trying to kind of summarize in this one slide, why to marry in the universe of my model. So there are 2 sources of gain from marriage. So there are economic sources and non-economic. When you think about the economic sources, I could list 3 of them. First, it's a presence of the public good within the household. So there is a good which is which all members of the household can enjoy together. And maybe this could be seen as a way it could be seen as a way to why to create a couple with another person. Another thing is insurance against shocks to productivity and leisure preferences. So, if you are single and you have very bad shock to your productivity, you lose your job, then you are in bigger troubles in case if you have a partner, and then this person for some times can somehow financially support you, and by that you kind of by that is providing an insurance against those shocks. And the third reason is the thing which I've already mentioned. So the presence of marriage premium on the labor market. So those who are married, maybe they earn more. So when it comes to non-economic gains from marriage, I just simply assume that people have preferences for being single over being married over staying single. So for some people, just having a partner is maybe more attractive than being a single, or vice versa. However, in my model, these gains, which I've just described, they are not homogeneous. So it matters with whom we marry. So when it comes to the source of heterogeneity, again, I can distinguish like economic and non-economic ones. When it comes to economic, I assume that marriage premium, so the kind of additional money which you can get on the labor market if you are married, it varies by partner's origin. So it matters if your partner is a native or is an immigrant. And another reason is the fact that people with different human capital, they have different leisure preferences. They have also different wages, which is not listed here. So, formulating a household with person with a different human capital could influence the total surplus generated by the household. When it comes to the source of heterogeneity, in the case of marital preferences, they vary over human capital of potential partners. So conditional on your own human capital, some people could have a stronger preferences to marry somebody with the same level of education or with the same origin. I see that Giuseppe, you have a question.
Yeah, I would like to ask a question. In the stylized facts at the beginning, you showed that there is a marriage premium for males, but not for females, right? In the bar plot. So I'm wondering whether it is cheap in terms of the tractability of your model, or whether you're doing it already to also have the marriage premium vary by gender.
Yes, thank you for the question. Yes, so I should mention it that all these facts, so the marriage premium and also marital preferences, this all vary by gender. Because I fully agree, even the stylized fact, they suggest that this kind of premiums are likely to be different. So I allow for this kind of flexibility in my model.
I have also a question.
Yes.
From what I understand, your framework does not take the point of view of the native that could marry a migrant. You are not including some gains that could come for the native. I'm thinking about having an access to the network of the migrant, maybe access to the local market of the country of origin or stuff like that. And also you just mentioned marital preferences, and I just would like to say if the German marriage market is characterized by an assortative matching on spouse education, and if you observe that also for intermarriages.
Okay, thank you for the question. So first of all, I'm sorry, apparently I was not precise. So whatever I'm talking about this model, it's about all. So it's about immigrants and natives. So if I talk about the marriage premium, which varies by origin, I'm thinking also about natives and immigrants. So my model is kind of trying also to capture the story which you mentioned, that I don't know, maybe if you're like low educated man and you marry an immigrant female, maybe this is like kind of, extending your labor market possibilities, and it can also be a source of the gain. So yes, that my model captures. When it comes to preferences, my model, I believe it's very flexible. So if we have assortative mating among one or the other, the parameters of the model should capture it. So yeah, I allow for, but maybe we don't have assortative, maybe. I mean, this is my model is fully flexible, I believe, at this point. Okay, so just let me quickly present timing of my model. My model consists of 3 stages. So the first stage is the location choice. So I assume that everyone is born with the human card. So I do not model the migration decision. So I take all migrants conditional that they already arrived to Germany. Then they are all drawing the location preferences. And at the end of this period, they choose their region where they live. And this is also for both. So it's for both, for immigrants and for me. And then in the region where they live, they enter the marriage market at the stage 2. They draw marital preferences, and then they decide with whom they want to marry. With whom I mean they choose, they marry a human capital type, or they stay single. And then at the stage 3, formulated coupled household and single household, they realize their leisure preferences and productivity shock, and they choose labor supply and consumption. Now I would like to present you the model, and I will start from the stage 3 and try to go back using kind of backward induction to the stage 1. So when it comes to wages in my model, there are like the wages are determined by 2 components. So there is like systematic component, which vary by gender, human capital, partner's origin, and region. And then there is a productivity shock. So when it comes to systematic part of the wage, it depends on the market value of own human capital, which vary by gender. Then there is a shift associated with partner origin. So by that, I'm going to capture if you're a single, if you are intermarried, or you are non-intermarried, how it influences your wage. And the last one, and I'm sorry, here is a typo because this region effect also vary by, so there should be also subscript HI. So this varies also by your own human capital. And this is the effect of the region. So this kind of captures like that different region can have different productivities, and this influence the wages of agents. And as I already mentioned, wages are subject to the productivity shock, which is log normally distributed. So given wages, agents derive also the utility, and so there are 2 types of good in my model. So there is a public good and private good. 1 public, 1 private good. Then agents also derive utility from leisure, and there are 3 choices of leisure. So leisure choice is discretized, so you can be full-time worker, part-time worker, and not working. And due to this is the purely data-driven decision, I restrict men choices only to full-time and not working, since I do not observe men who are part-time working in the data. Then of course the leisure choice is driven by the preferences for leisure. Preferences for leisure are a random variable, which is a function of your gender, if you are married or not, and your human capital, and is subject to the shock. And then additionally, I assume that women, they can have a preference shift when they decide to part-time work. So maybe for some women, it's more attractive to kind of, spend half time working in the household or half time working on the labor market. So this delta I, which is also a random variable, is going to capture this kind of preferences for part-time versus full-time working. And as I already mentioned, both preferences are subject to the shocks, which are normally distributed and uncorrelated. So in general, the framework which I'm using here, it follows the paper by Clapper et al. 2018, and this is a model of a collective household with transferable utility. But the fact that I have a transferable utility setting, it allows me that aggregated private consumption and public consumption does not depend on the Pareto weight. So at the stage 3, when usually we would have like a Pareto weight to maximize, I can ignore the Pareto weight for now, find the aggregated private and public consumption, and then I'm going to recover this Pareto weight on the marriage market, which I will be more specific in a moment. So conditional on leisure choices, couples are going to maximize their utility under the budget constraint. And the budget constraint consists of non-labor income. Then if agents decide to not to work, they obtain unemployment benefit, which is a function of their expected wage. That's why it's wage divided by the shock. And if they decide to work, then this function W net is a mapping between their gross wages to their net wages. And this function kind of mimics German tax system because Germany has a tax system which is based on the income splitting. So if one of the partners is not working and the other is full-time working, then the tax threshold is just half of the income. So this could kind of explain why I do observe in the data quite a lot of women who are part-time working, because probably due to how the system is designed, for some households it's profitable when one of the partners is only part-time working. And then they spend this income on two goods, so on private consumption and public consumption. Okay, so that's the stage 3 of my model. Now I would like to present you the stage 2, so the marriage part.
I think Joel had a question.
Oh,
yes,
sorry.
yes, I was going to say.
Oh, I haven't seen it.
You can talk, you.
Actually, I didn't raise a hand, but I do have a question, so that's that's totally fine. So it's not a clarification question. So here you're mentioning that there's a maximization at the couple level, but I kind of misunderstand then the utility of the different types of work. So the being part-time work or not working or full-time working. So yes, yeah, exactly.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So the point is that, like, if you do not work full time, then you are getting this alpha I. So that's why it's a sum of those two here, and this is kind of your preference for leisure. However, I allow that in case of part-time working, your preferences for leisure could be a little bit different. And this is captured by this expression here. So by delta I times I PT I. So this is kind of capturing the fact that, okay, you know, like if you work part-time, maybe the leisure which you derive, it's a little bit lower in comparison to not working. Is that clear now?
No, right. So that part was clear, but where I had the understanding is this is like an individual specific utility, but then you mentioned but then you mentioned that it's there's a maximization at the couple level. So, and there I was wondering, like, do they define the utility term? Like, I guess then you would need both utility terms to enter, right? So of the partner 1 and partner 2.
Yes. So if you look at
and so they jointly decide on who basically goes to work, I guess.
Yes.
Okay.
So,
right. Right. Okay. Yeah, I see.
Yes. So I have here Sam, and because if you look at a lot of work by Capri, he's proving that transferable utility is a feature of the preferences, which is which under specific cardinalization. So here I'm using this kind of framework which he proposed, and that's why maybe it was a little bit confusing. That I have a sum of those two utility, but I'm using exponential cardinalization.
Thanks, it's clear. I basically missed that line, so I'm sorry.
Okay, no, I'm sorry. Thank you. Thank you very much.
So there is another question by
yes.
If you go back to the wage process before the if I understand correctly, there is a shift associated with the partner origin, and there is a component related to human capital. But I'm thinking whether it could be the case that these two things interact with each other in the sense that there are sort of like returns to assortative mating, like meaning that the returns to being intermarried could vary by whether you are marrying with, I don't know, a highly educated partner, that gives you access to networks and things like that. I don't know if this is a complication that makes everything harder or like impossible, or whether you think this could be an addition.
Thank you for the question. So actually, I did not think in the initial version. I was thinking about it, but then, to keep the model a little bit more tractable, I decided to resign from it. But I think that now I can also try to make this not only depending on the origin, but in general also on the education. And yeah, I can include it in the estimation in the future and tell a little bit more about it. Yeah, thanks you. That's a good point. If there are no more questions, I will go to the marriage market part. So when it comes to
just one thing, just one small question. So maybe to explain why females, there's no like the wage premium of intermarriage. I don't know if maybe exploring the assets channel that maybe, some natives could have more assets than foreigners, and for that reason, the reservation wages for some females might be higher, and therefore they do not work. I don't know, because in this budget constraint, you don't explore any type of like assets or financial market
it's captured by this non-labor income here. And this non-labor income is the function of partners' human capital. So if you marry a native,
that also varies by
Yes.
It varies by type. Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, you are completely right, because if I go to the data and I check like summaries, I observe that yes, natives has more non-labor income, which is not surprising due to the fact that usually they have more assets. So yes, this is something which is partially driving.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so when it comes to the utility from marriage, but the utility is sum of the two components. So there is a deterministic component, and then there is a preference shock. So deterministic components consist of the first element is the expected joint working life utility of couple. So now I'm going to be a little bit more precise when it comes to about it. So from the estimation of the stage 3, I can kind of calculate what is the expected total surplus generated by the couple. So I observe 2 ages with the human capital, and then what I can say is, okay, if they marry, the utility generated by this household will be like this. So that will be U bar, and also it varies by the region. Okay, and then as I mentioned, I'm going to get my Pareto weights back on the marriage market. So what I assume here is like the full commitment. There are no divorces. So I'm saying, okay, people at the marriage market, they meet, they agreed how to split the future surplus generated by the household, and then they follow this rule to the end of their life. So how they split is determined by this expression. So by this mu divided by 1 plus mu, where mu is the Pareto weight from the original problem, and this will serve as a market clearing price on the marriage market. So the equilibrium will kind of tell me, okay, if I observe these patterns and these preferences, what will be the division of the future utility? So what will be the Pareto weight in the household depending on the equilibrium conditions? And then, of course, like, as I already mentioned, that people also marry for the kind of non-economic gains, and by this adding this phi 1 and phi 2, by this I'm going to measure this utility that stays for the difference in partner's origin and education. So this, if we observe the assortative mating on the marriage market, then those 2 parameters will be negative. And then there is also the preference shock, which I already mentioned, which I assume that agents do not have a preference shock towards like a particular person, but towards the type of the human capital. So also agents could decide to stay single, and utility from staying single consists of the expected working life utility of single person of the given type. I haven't showed you the single problem, but it's fairly similar to the marriage one, just simpler. And then I assume that each type of the human capital have taste for being single. And additionally, there is a preference. So
yes, you have
yes?
like 5 more minutes, so I think you have to hurry up.
So I will try to hurry up. Okay, so the solution to the marriage market is very simple. So what I assume that omegas are extreme value type 1. So the probability is given by the well-known multinomial logit expression. And now I just would like to very briefly describe stage 1, so the location choice. Unfortunately, this is the stage which I still haven't estimated, so I will also not able to present you empirical results, but just the construction of this stage is very similar. So we have expected utility from the stage 2. So how much going to this location will me provide me when it comes to marriage market and later the labor market. Then there is some migration cost, which measure the cost of choosing one or the other region. And this utility is subject to the preference shock. And again, I assume the preference shocks are type 1 distributed. And this gives me a multinomial logit structure here. Okay, so let me use this 5 minutes to present you estimation and result. So the stage 3 of the model is estimated using simulated method of moments. I mentioned a lot of different models when it comes to wages and labor supply. As you can see, the model fit of is quite good. Most of the simulated models are relatively close to the one which I obtained in the data. So just to show you, let's look. So here, what I have different bars which are presenting the log wage of married male who is an immigrant, and the different bars are representing with whom he is married. So, for example, here is like a native, low educated immigrant, native, the secondary educated, immigrant secondary educated, and so on. So what we can see is that what we can see also in the data is that those who are married to native, they on average have higher wages, excluding this lowest education group. And my model more or less capture this kind of dynamics. So now I just would like to briefly present the estimation of the marriage surplus. So this is this expected joint working life utility which couples get. So so what we can see is that here are the different female human capitals, here are the different male human capitals, and we can see that if we, for example, fix male human capital, and the higher the education of the female, the higher will be the economic value generated by the household. And if we compare females with exactly the same education but of immigrant, then the household will generate a lower value in the future. So now, just briefly describing the estimation of the marriage market, I'm following more or less the framework proposed by Cho and Xiao 2006, which allows me to identify all the parameters of the model, so the preferences for this utility, and to identify mu, so the Pareto weight of the original problem. So here I'm presenting data and simulated probabilities. So I'm still working at the marriage market because, as you can see here, my model more or less is predicting the patterns. However, in some cases it fails. So I am trying to understand why, for example, here the differences between simulated and the simulated probabilities and then this one obtained from data is so big. So this is still ongoing work. And just to focus on the parameters. So when it comes to preferences parameters, I would like to focus on the downer part of the table because I think it's more interesting. So I estimate this marriage market for different cohorts, for 4 different cohorts. And what we can observe is that, first of all, there is assortative mating because the parameter for this utility from difference in education is negative and is decreasing over time, which would suggest that this assortative mating becomes weaker in the last cohort. And the same holds when it comes to the similarity in origin, that is definitely the highest among people born in the 50s, and basically 1/3 lower when it comes to people born in the 80s. Okay, so just I think my time is gone. So just quickly let me summarize. So I consider as intermarriage as a potential mechanism of assimilation, and immigrants in my model, or what I was trying to convince you, they can trade off labor market opportunities for taste of similarity, and the descriptive evidence and also suggests that how migrants are located within the country, it has an impact on the marriage choices, and later it also transmits to the labor market performance. And this means that location choices, they have impact on wages in two ways. So directly via the differences in wage, regional differences in wages, and also indirectly via the marriage market. And this would suggest that it would be interesting to look how the policies which are influencing the location choice of immigrants, how they impact their labor outcomes via directly or indirectly. And I hope that in the future research I would be able to tell you more about it. Thank you very much.
Okay, so thank you, Jacek, for this nice presentation. So let's start with some of the Q&A. So if ever anyone has any question, I can unmute yourself, and then you can ask for it. So let me see. So there's a question by Giuseppe. So go ahead, Giuseppe.
So I wanted to ask you, you showed that there is this decrease in assortative mating, no? It's negative, decreasing.
Let me show the slides. Okay, so
here, but what is the dimension here of assortative mating? Is it assortative in terms of education or in terms of intermarriage? That I didn't understand.
So as you can see here, this preferences parameters, which are measuring, how much utility or disutility you derive from the difference in education and difference in origin, they are negative, and they are all negative. And at what you could see is like, okay, so if it's just one level of education difference, yeah, this utility is lower, and if it's even two levels of education, then this utility is getting even greater. And what I meant is that, like, if you look at the cohort of 50s, this value is like higher than the value in the cohort of 80s. I mean, and the decrease when it comes to education is not that big, but I see a relatively strong decrease when it comes to difference in origin, because it dropped from 90 to basically 65, which is a significant number, which could suggest that, I don't know, for example, societies are getting more tolerant, and kind of people see less problems to marry a person of different origin.
Okay.
But also, sorry, Giuseppe.
No, go ahead. I'll ask another question.
No, I was saying that it would be also interesting to see like some descriptives of how has their intermarriage rate have evolved between cohorts. No, if we see, in fact, that all their cohorts have lower share of intermarriage rate and then grow to have this nice story of changing patterns.
Yes. Okay. Thank you. Yeah, that's a good suggestion. Actually, yeah, I have only the patterns by education, but I think I don't have them by cohorts. So yes, that I will definitely add to my presentation.
Because also the cohorts, I think there's a change in the composition. No, at the beginning of the migrants that arrived in the 80s were coming from a type of countries, and then they change. And also, I don't know if you can do some analysis by type of foreign country, but I think it's too hard because you have this panel survey that doesn't have much observations. But at some point, if you want to exploit also the microcensus,
So the problem actually doesn't lie in the panel, because for the marriage market I'm using the microcensus. But the problem is that in microcensus, this variable, if you are foreign born, I only observe from 2005, and I do not observe the place when they were born. So I cannot tell you if you are born, like, you know, I would be even happy to see, you know, like outside of European Union, inside of European Union.
Yeah,
that would be, you know, enough. But unfortunately,
but
there is only information, you know, about this.
Oh, okay. I thought the microcensus had for the birthplace. I thought.
No, I mean, I can go back and check again, but I thought that it doesn't, because I think that's limited. But I will then, if you have doubts, that maybe I should come back to the documentation, because I was dealing with different waves, and of course in different waves this information is also changing. So maybe I missed something. Thank you.
So there's also a question by Joel. You can speak, Joel, now.
Yeah, thank you. And actually, it's perfect, because my one of my questions was exactly related to what you just discussed. And so I was wondering. So you replied you're using, this is based on microcensus. So I was wondering, do you know the year of arrival of individuals? Because the reason I'm asking is that I would, and this goes back to a point that was made just before. I would think that one of the composition effects that you could observe is that you have more younger migrants arriving. So in the 50s, 60s, it was basically a single or a lot of single workers, while later on you would have family members or already young existing families that would migrate. And so kids would go to school, and if kids go to school, they're also more likely to meet natives, or and also, like, there's an integration process that just starts or just has different dynamics from the working age individuals. So that was in the beginning I was thinking about the ZUP data, and I was going to ask you whether whether you get rid of the observations, the individuals that do get educated in Germany, because I think that information is available in ZUP. But so I was wondering whether the microcensus allows you to do anything in that direction. So to, for instance, exclude individuals that arrive before age 16, say, or before age 10. I don't know.
Okay, so thank you very much for the question. So yeah, so actually, I at the beginning was only working on the SOEP data, but then there was a problem with the estimation of the marriage market. So that's true. SOEP is much richer in the information, especially when it comes to immigrants. I would have to. So my idea was, because I mean, this is obviously like a very good concern about my research. So in the sense, yeah, it's likely that maybe years of age of arrival, it's fully driving the results or something like that. It's a perfectly fine concern. So how I wanted to address this concern, I wanted to, you know, like, now that my definition of immigrant is like, you know, foreign born versus country born, but I can, you know, just try to change this definition and maybe try to, you know, I don't know, define that immigrants are only people who arrive to Germany after 60, and then re-estimate the model, and then check if I still observe exactly the same outcome, because that would a little bit answer the question which you asked. So yeah. Yes, so I actually started just recently working on the microcensus, and since, you know, this is the data which I do not have a direct access, it's a little bit slow process. So I think that definitely I should come back and check if I can, like, get more information out of it.
I think that's, I mean, if you do have the age of arrival or the year of arrival, which can give you the age with the other information that you have in the microcensus, I mean, that's nice if you can constrain, let's say 16, 12, whatever, but make, or it can be a robustness check, or just seeing, because indeed it's kind of intriguing, this considerable drop in the origin specific preference that you showed us just before.
Thank you for your comment.
And also this local education versus foreign education, or arriving at a later age could also affect wages, right? So if you get education in Germany, it's probably different than coming with a degree from abroad. So in that sense, it would also kind of mitigate fears in that dimension.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, so definitely I would like to explore it more. Thank you.
And if the organizers allow me one final question, I was just wondering, what the geographical dimension is of the model. So that's something I missed. So what's the geographical unit that you are working on?
So because I was starting with the GSOIR data, I just divided Germany into 3 regions. So I mean, I'm dropping the southeast of Germany because basically it's hard to talk about immigration because the immigration rate there is very low. So I focus on I focus on 3 big regions of Germany, so north, west, and south. But yes, I need to also check because I have the information in the microcensus exactly about the Bundesland where they live. So I can check if amount of immigrants will allow me to go into smaller units. Because maybe I'm for sure will not be able to go at the Bundesland level because some of the Bundesland are very small, like Bremen, for example, or Saarland. But maybe a little bit disaggregated into 6 regions or something like that. I will be very happy to do it.
And there the issue would come from lack of data in the ZUP to do it, let's say at the Bundesland level.
Yes, I just do not observe enough of immigrants, and unfortunately the Cho and Xiao method which I'm using, this method relies on a good estimation of the frequencies from the data. So if my data are very imprecise and my frequency estimates are imprecise, then it's driving, this kind of error is influencing the whole estimation process, unfortunately.
Okay, thanks. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
So there was a last question by Nadia that is just a clarification saying what's the difference between economic assimilation immigrant and economic integration immigrant? I don't know if you mentioned before.
Okay, so well, I'm using the general assimilation question, but because integration is a little bit more controversial for some people, because by integration then they understand that the immigrants are getting the same in some sense. Assimilation, I don't distinguish like much. So I mean, by assimilation, I'm just understanding that when it comes to outcomes, if we condition on the certain type of characteristics, immigrants are like let's use it that the fact you're immigrant or not is not influencing the outcome at the end. That's how I understand it, but I'm not sure if I answered the question.
For some sociologists, integration include assimilation from the migrants and inclusion from the native. So it should be a 2 move at the same time to have integration.
So I thought that the integration is just stronger, and I mean I'm here not making like a very strong statement.
As your model also impact native, I guess you can use the word integration and not only assimilation. I have a question myself, just to know if you identify the marriage statute, so intermarriages or not, based on the co-residence with the spouse, or do you have information of the origin of the spouse, even if she or he is not co-resident? Because I imagine that a lot of immigrants are married at their origin country. Are you able to integrate them in the...
So I'm trying to drop those people from my analysis because actually they are not part of the model. So if you think about it, they do not participate in the marriage market. They participated in the marriage market in Poland, in France, in Austria, in Turkey, whatever they're coming from. So for this reason, I try to do my best to kind of drop them from the model. Of course, there is a problem of the limited information when it comes to marriage histories. And this is something which I cannot, unfortunately, overcome. However, yes, I'm trying to just not take them into account when it comes to the marriage market. So,
but even for native and immigrant that are married and are both living in Germany, I can imagine that you have some white marriages where nobody are co-residing, but this marriage is actually taking place. So if you are not included a couple that are not co-resident, you should avoid this problem maybe.
Yeah, so actually I'm only looking at the people who live together. So my definition is just if in the survey you declare yourself head and partner, you're a head the partner. And yeah, I'm ignoring this kind of group of people who do not live together. Yeah, so like
I
cohabitation is the basic.
I guess it works for Germany because it should be almost all nuclear households. So yeah, you can identify that clearly.
Yeah, I have, even in SWAP, I had this information. If your partner is living outside of the household, it exists. It doesn't exist in the microcensus, but it was not like a very big result. So I mean, yeah, it could be, of course, like kind of a problem, but I believe that due to the small magnitude, it's not biasing significantly the results. It's not driving them.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much.
May I ask one last question? So once you tune your model and everything, right? You're going to conduct some counterfactual simulation, right? And you mentioned at the beginning that you want to look at policies that reallocate migrants, so that the goal of the policymaker would be to sort of like even out the native to immigrant to native gap, right? But I guess like this could have also implications for overall wage inequality. So like I don't really see whether, or to which extent rather, this is a desirable outcome to have, because there could be other spillovers now in society.
Yes, so yeah, that's true. This is okay. So there are two things here. Okay. So first, what I actually would like to measure is that, like, I assume that since now migrants are free to choose, I assume that their choices are optimal. So like I'm observing efficient choices. So then my answer to the question will be like, okay, what happens when we reallocate? What is the welfare loss? And this model perfectly allows me to, kind of measure the welfare loss. And that could also, I don't know, answer the question, what would happen? What would be the welfare gain if we allow refugees to locate whenever they want, instead of, fixing their location, what happens in a lot of countries? So I was thinking about this kind of exercises, more into the welfare gains and welfare losses. Because if I would like to go more with the labor market, you are right, there are also equilibrium effects there. And I would need to design like a general equilibrium model with determined wages and stuff like that. So this would be probably naturally like a next step to do when I have the model. So, if my model is like estimating, fitting all the data, working well, I can say something about the welfare losses. Yeah, the natural next step would be to, include the general equilibrium and more look at from the labor market perspective. But unfortunately, the current setting does not allow me for that. That's why I prefer to focus on the question which I just mentioned in the short run with my research.
Hello?
Yes, I will hear you.
Yes, please, I have a question for you, Jacek.
Yes.
You spoken about the policy dimension, and you spoke about the relocation and how it can influence the marriage choices. My question is, what do you think about the legal dimension in all of this? For example, the difficulties to get the nationality once you are married. Of course, okay. This can differ from one country to another. Do you think it can influence the marriage choices and also the wages of the immigrants?
Thank you very much. It's a very good question. So if you, for example, this is the question which I face usually in the US, because in the US, marriage is a very big thing when it comes to getting like a permit, it allows you to stay forever and stuff like that. So yes, it could vary country by country. So in case of US, probably that should be included into the model somehow, or at least being considered. When it comes to Germany, this gains what I'm trying to argue. I haven't presented this slide before, but I also was trying to look, okay, what the marriage gives you from the legal perspective. So, I mean, what I assume is that I do not consider that was already a little bit answer to the Elsa question. So I do not consider people who marry outside of Germany. So the fact that you marry in Germany, it means that you already get like a permit to work there at least for some time. So, you know, they allow you to enter. So the German law is like, it's constructed in this way that the marriage is not that profitable for you. So that's true that if you have a temporary residence permit, if you marry a native or somebody who is just a citizenship holder, then this allows you to stay like in Germany permanently due to the family reunion purposes. So yeah, but on the other hand, if you consider like a German law and what I read at least, this like even though if you don't marry a native and you know you are this temporary residence holder, you just need to keep this temporary status a little bit longer than those who marry to native to change it into permanent. So if you look at this point too, you can see that if you are married to a native, this period of temporary periods is shortened from 5 to 3 years, but at least 2 years of marriage. So, you know, if you think about it, the gain is not very big because I assume that, you know, to marry a native, you need to stay at least 1 year, 2 years in Germany. If I assume that, you know, that they do not know each other before the migration. Yes. So then there is a marriage and this is shortening from 5 maybe to 4 years or maybe to 3 years in the very, you know, like a good scenario. So it's not that strong when it comes to Germany, well, this gain. So they exist, yeah, that's true. But what I try to argue here is like, okay, they are not like fundamental here.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, so I think there are no more questions, so we can finish.
Okay, so thank you everyone for your participation today. It was a pleasure to have you, Jacek, today. We invite you to participate to our next session. We will receive Anatole Chason from the European University Institute, and he will present a joint work with Damiano Argan entitled The Effect of Foreign Media on International Migration, the Case of Italian TV in Albania. Just remind you that all these exchanges are registered and are recorded, and you can have the video online on our website and on our YouTube channel in the next week. If you have some comments that you want to do about this session or more globally about the organization of the seminar, you have a feedback form on our website. So I invite you to go to our website. So thank you very much, everybody, and have a nice evening.